What is up, guys? It is the Blue Bloods here, coming at y'all with our third episode of the Blue Bloods Draft Corner. We finally got to the Ravens, and we're joined by the man who knows this franchise better than anyone. We got Makana here from the TTB podcast. You can find it on YouTube and all podcast streaming platforms. I would recommend checking it out. It's one of my favorite things to watch on YouTube right now. He's got some real good takes about a lot of prospects, and he'll break everything down about the Ravens draft strategy. But I appreciate you joining us today, man.
I'm excited. I am so excited for this draft, and on YouTube I've been having to do so much research because I don't watch a ton of college football other than Stanford, which isn't the hub for college football prospects that it should be. So I got to go back and watch all those old games. So it's a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So we got to start with last season. I mean, an 11-5 record. Get to the playoffs. They run into the Bills, which really were a buzzsaw toward the end of the year. How did you feel about the year as a whole? What would you grade the Ravens season?
D. I was incredibly disappointed with how they did, and not as so much with the regular season. I mean, they had COVID issues. They had a lot of issues. Lamar missed the Steelers game. But the inability to recognize that there's a major problem in Greg Roman, the entire year, they never decided to ever open up the playbook. They continued to go in the same exact holes that they've gone through ever since Greg Roman came in and losing identity and things like that. They won the playoff game, but then they got to the Bills and just seemed once again like they had no identity. They actually opened up the playbook more once Lamar Jackson went out for the game with a concussion. They decided to give their backup quarterback more reins throwing the football than they ever gave Lamar the entire season. So overall, for me as a Ravens fan, it's championship or bust. So I mean, them winning a playoff game, yeah, it's fun, but they never showed any real improvement in what they should be doing. Like it was a worse team than they had 2 years ago, and they struggled. So I was disappointed, but
Oh,
I'll be honest. I thought we were about to get a much better grade, and then I agree. I actually agree with that. I think they were pretty disappointing this last season, honestly.
Yeah. Oh man, a D though, man. I thought I was at least aiming for a C. I'm like, you can at least let them not have to retake the class anymore. But man, looking at free agency, I feel like the Ravens got a lot of flack for the Sammy Watkins signing. For what I've been reading, and everyone's like, okay, what did you really get with Sammy Watkins? But outside of him, how did you feel the Ravens did overall in free agency?
I mean, so far, I actually believe that they've done an excellent job in free agency. I believe they still have around $10 million in cap space, and I've heard rumors that Justin Houston and a few other edge rushers will be coming to Baltimore in the next few weeks or so. So can't really speculate too much as to how that goes, but overall, I think, they were the first team to sign anybody when they signed Zeitler at, whatever it was like 3 a.m. When free agency opened, which was a very solid acquisition. And then what they did was they brought back players. They just brought back Anthony Levine Sr. They brought back LJ Fort. They brought back Derek Wolfe, all players that played pivotal roles last season. And I think a lot of Ravens fans, the vocal ones are the ones that haven't been Ravens fans for very long, and they don't understand that the Ravens don't get big free agents like Kenny Golladay. They're not going to pay a ton of money for wide receivers. And Sammy Watkins, I like the signing. It's a $5 million deal with $1 million in incentives to make it potentially $6 million. And I'm actually a firm believer in Hollywood Brown. I love Hollywood. I think he is a true wide receiver one. My issue is that he gets no opportunities to succeed. I don't see, him developing and becoming that guy unless something changes in Baltimore, which is the issue. But I think that Sammy Watkins is solid. Whether or not he can stay healthy is the real question. But, I think he'll be solid. His best season of his career came with Greg Roman back in Buffalo in 14 or 15 it was. So I think Eric DeCosta has done a good job overall in free agency. He just gets a lot of flack from the new Ravens fans that came over with the flashiness of Lamar Jackson. So they're kind of going wild, getting angry about us not getting big time names.
Yeah. And I mean, Sammy Watkins is Sammy Watkins. He's going to kind of produce. And I think it was fine signing. I mean, $5 million, you can't really go wrong there. So I think that with Hollywood Brown, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I'm not a believer, I don't think a lot of people are. Sammy Watkins, obviously, an addition. And if only they would move Lamar out to wide receiver, I think your wide receiving core would be set. But no, I think the wide receiver is a big need in this draft. Maybe not as big as edge rusher. What are your thoughts there? What do you think the Ravens' biggest need is in this draft?
Oh, it's absolutely edge rusher. I would actually be okay with. I would honestly be okay if the Ravens didn't draft a wide receiver in this draft. Now, I would want them to draft a wide receiver, but like they have to address the edge rusher position because they literally don't have a single edge rusher on their roster. Right. They have players at outside linebacker and defensive end, but none of them are edge rushers. So that's a major hole. And then also center is a hole. And then whether or not they trade Orlando Brown Jr., right tackle is a hole that will be open at the end of the season, if not, before the season starts, depending on Orlando Brown news. So wide receiver is probably around fourth on my list in terms of overall need. I'm content with the wide receivers. It's more so Greg Roman in that wide receiver group because he has never had a good receiving core. But at least we got rid of David Culley, who has only ever had like 3 1,000-yard receivers in like 20 years or something like that. So they're making some changes, but edge rusher is by far the biggest need because we don't even have one.
Right.
Oh man. Yeah, that's a good, and I mean, even though I think you'll pick 27th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So it'll be at the end of the first, but I still think there's some value, especially at edge rusher, because there's not a lot of teams, and I would say the top 15, they're going to draft an edge rusher. Arizona was a possibility, but they signed JJ Watt. I don't know if they're going to go again at defensive line. You look at Azeez Ojulari, you look at Gregory Rousseau if he's there, you look at Jalen Phillips. Which one of those three would like you can rank them? Like if 1 to 3, who do you want the most, all the way to who do you want the least out of those three guys?
One of them I would not draft whatsoever, and that's Gregory Rousseau. I am absolutely not drafting. Now, I will say I don't think he's the worst prospect whatsoever. But for what the Ravens need, which is instant, they need instant production from their edge rusher that they draft. Rousseau is not going to give you that. He could absolutely become the most talented player out of this draft class. I love Rousseau, but for the Ravens, they need a guy that'll be able to come in and get sacks with at least a move. So my guy right now out of those three is definitely Azeez Ojulari, just because he at least does have a bit of a go-to move in that little chop that he likes to do. Whether or not it would be uber successful in the NFL, as he's undersized, yet to be determined, but at least having production against SEC caliber offensive tackles would be better than I think having production against, the ACC. Not to say the ACC isn't as good, but just like the SEC is like, that's the conference. that's the one. If you want to look at production.
I like this guy.
Yeah, as you know, our listening base will eat that up, giving credit to the SEC. But I like Azeez. I mean, I would have liked to. I mean, I don't think I'm alone saying I wish he would have produced a little bit more at Georgia. I don't think he got really a fair shot to be the go-to edge rusher that I think he can be. But it's funny because you say they need a pass rusher, and he might not be great at the run, but if there's one thing Azeez Ojulari can do, that is get to the quarterback. I believe he was a 92 overall pass rush grade by Pro Football Focus this year, and that was one of the highest in the country. The kid is huge, but I mean, I'm going to have to say I'm a little bit higher on Rousseau than you are. It sounds like I think Rousseau's better than Jalen Phillips because the only reason Jalen Phillips got a starting spot this year is due to the opt-out of Gregory Rousseau. But, I mean, are there any late-round guys? So not these first-round guys at edge rusher. So let's say they take a wide receiver falls. Like you get, for some reason, let's just say Jalen Waddle or someone falls, and they're like, we got to take this wide receiver. Yeah, or Jamar Chase. Or just something crazy. Yeah, and you have to take an edge rusher late. Who do you like in like the third or later round at edge rusher?
My guy that I really like is Patrick Jones. I think that he would fit well out of Pitt, just because at Pitt he did show the ability to drop into coverage a little bit. Not saying he's a zone coverage linebacker. But Wink Martindale loves to drop his pass rushers into zone coverage. I don't like it. And he drops them into man coverage. I mean, I watched the Ravens play against the Chiefs, and I saw Mecole Hardman run right past Matthew Judon in man coverage. Don't understand why he was ever in that situation, but Wink Martindale puts, his edge rushers even in coverage situations a fair bit of the time. So I like Patrick Jones out of Pitt. I think he's definitely a guy to target, kind of in that third, day two, aspect of the draft.
Yeah, both of those guys, Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones from Pitt. I feel like those Pitt D linemen are just getting absolutely disrespected. No one but you is ever going to come on the show and say Patrick Jones is my guy, and I love that about you. I mean, I also look at the guy. So we cover the Senior Bowl. Janarius Robinson out of Florida State. He's probably a 4th, 5th round pick. He had the longest wingspan in Senior Bowl history, if I remember right. 6'5", 265. Never really got a chance to play, that much at Florida State, but he was so explosive all Senior Bowl. And I think he's just one of those, he might not be your guy that you were talking about earlier where you can come in and play immediately. But I think if you have to wait till the 5th round to get your edge guy, I mean, when you take a guy with a 6'6" frame, 265 with speed and explosiveness, you can't really go wrong with that in the late rounds.
Yeah, I mean, you bring him up. One of the guys that I'm actually really high on for the Ravens to draft, not as much of an edge rusher, but size outside linebacker, is Charles Snowden out of Virginia Tech. Kind of a similar story, just with that kind of size and more so to set the edge and things like that. I think that's still an absolute need. And I can almost guarantee the Ravens will be drafting more than one edge rusher. Like they may draft edge rusher each day of the draft with how much of a need that it is. So, looking at all of those levels and things like that, it's almost necessary as a Ravens fan as doing mock drafts because it's just such a hole. So, all 3 levels, they're going to need guys to step up right away, but they can absolutely try and draft guys that can be developmental prospects. They've drafted some later round guys in recent years, whether it's Zadarius Smith, Matthew Judon, guys that they've been able to draft, developed a little bit, and then been able to plug them in. So that could absolutely be something that they do in the draft because, they'll draft a few guys and they'll all get snaps.
Yeah, and there was one guy I know me and Brandon talked about for the Senior Bowl. He actually was the Senior Bowl defensive MVP out of Tulane, a kid named Cameron Sample. He was a late bloomer. He was a 0 or 1 star recruit coming out of high school, was a late bloomer. Now he's 6'4", 280. And coming out of Tulane, no one really knew about him. And he was putting Alex Leatherwood into the dirt out of Tulane. I mean, he was going to be undrafted, and now they're talking about 3rd, 4th round. And, I mean, this kid, to me, just popped off the screen. I got to sit in on his post-game interview. He's a personable kid. He was the leader of Tulane's defense. And I just think the Ravens seem to specialize in finding those type of players in the later rounds. So I think a guy like Cameron Sample, if you're a Ravens fan, would be someone you might not recognize, but I promise you'll probably enjoy him down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I think he could definitely be somebody else. And one other guy that I think that the Ravens could really go after at the edge rusher position is Shaka Toney out of Penn State as a specialist 3rd down pass rusher. Because I've had to look up so many guys for this edge rusher position. It's crazy. Like I was so anti Matthew Judon, if you didn't know. So like I've been looking up ways to get rid of that dude for years. And looking into it, I did not like him. Wanted him gone forever. But yeah, I think he could. I mean, out of Tulane as well. I believe Tulane is very close to Maryland. I mean, I'm not from Maryland, but I believe that's in the Northeast. If I'm not, okay, I'm not.
Louisiana.
Tulane's
Louisiana. Okay, it's Toledo. It's Toledo then. Isn't it?
Toledo's the one.
That's
in okay.
Ohio.
Yes.
I'm sorry, people from Maryland that listen to this. I'm very sorry. I'm from the West Coast. Our cities are much. We got 4 cities on the West Coast, so I know those. But yeah, I think he could be very good to draft. Yeah,
I like him too. Brandon, what edge rusher do you look for? Like, who do you like in this draft? Apparently, I think you're a little bit higher on Rousseau too. But who is like a mid-round guy that you like as well?
So I mean, honestly, Zach, it's you guys have kind of already covered all my bases here. I'm a big Azeez Ojulari guy, mostly because he's BJ Ojulari's big brother. I know that family's got some real talent there. Obviously, Greg Rousseau. You know, I don't understand how he is on Makana's do not draft list, but we'll let him have that. I don't know. I mean, I feel like this draft class isn't super deep when it comes to edge rushers, but there's a lot of good guys there, and there's a lot of like real talent that Baltimore can go with in this draft.
I agree. And, looking at wide receiver, man, I mean, I know you don't want them to draft a wide receiver early, but is there a late round guy at wide receiver that you're like, okay, if we draft him, he'll fit into our system and he'll be good? Or are you just completely do not draft anybody in the first round at wide receiver?
First round wide receiver. If I had to draft one, I would definitely prefer Terrence Marshall Jr. just because of the size. Now I think Rashad Bateman is the probably better prospect. He's probably more pro ready, but what the Ravens need is they just need a big wide receiver that can go up and make contested catches. And that's what Terrence Marshall can do. They don't need a crazy route tree, or anything like that. They need to send him deep and they need to throw a jump ball. And he's going to be able to do that. So Terrence Marshall Jr. would be that guy. And particularly, I would be okay with drafting him if the Ravens were to do something like trade Orlando Brown Jr., pick up another first-round pick, and take edge earlier in the draft. So at 27, they could potentially take him if he's still on the board, whether or not Tennessee takes him or something like that. So Terrence Marshall Jr. would be my realistic first-round guy.
Yeah, I like it. Y'all need that go-to guy, like you said. But, I mean, there's a lot of mock drafts out there now that have y'all taken a guy who is not a one-on-one possession wide receiver by the name of Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss, 5'9". I don't know how he's getting first-round talent. If y'all draft Elijah Moore, where does he fit in y'all's system, and how upset would you be as a Ravens fan?
I mean, I don't know how many keys my keyboard would have. There is no way the Ravens could go out there and have a run-heavy offense with Elijah Moore and Hollywood Brown on the outside. It would not work. Like you couldn't run they already have to take out Hollywood, who's supposed to be their number one wide receiver, in order to, run certain plays. Having two tiny wide receivers, then there's also, I mean, there's plenty of small guys in the draft that people want the Ravens to draft. And I'm like, you can't draft them because they would be lacking so much size, and for how much they run, like, it's not going to work. So I really don't. I mean, I'm not against him as a prospect. I think he could work in a passing offense, but a team that wants to run the ball as much as the Ravens do, and like, no, please no, please no, please no.
Zach ruined my day. Like 2 days ago, he sent me for context, I'm a big Saints fan. I live in Louisiana. I live in Baton Rouge. And so he sent me a mock draft where Elijah Moore was being drafted by the Saints. Ruined my entire weekend.
I mean, there is like a late round guy I like for you guys, though. He opted out, so I don't know how much you or, Ravens fans know about him, but his name's Sage Surratt out of Wake Forest. He's a big body wide receiver. I mean, I believe he was the leading wide receiver for Wake Forest 2 years ago. He had over 1,000 yards receiving, 11 touchdowns. And they compare him to Dez Bryant coming out in terms of he can just be that wide receiver one guy. He can block. He's 6'3", 220. So he's not going to get overpowered by any cornerbacks out there. I mean, is there any other big body guys like Surratt that you see in the mid rounds where it's like, okay, if he falls to us, man, he could be our solution at wide receiver?
My answer for wide receiver has been the same since this player announced for the draft. There's one guy I've been I probably talk about him in almost every single video, at least 4 or 5 times a week. Simi Fehoko. I'm a Stanford football fan. Simi Fehoko is that guy. 6'4", 4.37 to 4.42, depending on the person you ask, from the Stanford Pro Day. Really just a vertical threat. But, I mean, there's a ton of guys that are big-bodied in this draft that are in those late rounds. Tamarion Terry, TJ Vasher. I mean, TJ Vasher is like 6'6". I know he put on like 25 pounds of muscle, but he has like no work ethic, according to like every scouting report you can look up. But, yeah, there's a lot of big-bodied guys in the late rounds. It feels like, kind of second round, third round wide receivers, a lot of those guys are very undersized, but then there's a lot of fourth, really the day 3 wide receivers is where the big bodied wide receivers are going to be able to thrive. So any of those guys I would be okay with taking, except for Terry, or not Terry. I'm okay with Tamarian Terry. TJ Vasher I don't really want. But Simi Fehoko is my guy, as a Stanford fan, as a fan of vertical threats, as a fan of size at the wide receiver position. He's my guy. But, Sage Surratt is another guy, that I'm completely content with the Ravens taking. As long as the receiver has size, when I'm doing mock drafts, I'm like, okay, I want to take a wide receiver here. I go by wide receiver. I click on the name, and all I do is I look at the height. And if they aren't, if they aren't 6'3", I click off unless they're like way under, they're like, oh, this guy fell really far. He was projected this spot. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll look at him. But if they aren't 6'3", I'm like, I click off. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. You are not coming to Baltimore. I don't want you. I'm a height elitist at the wide receiver position in this draft. So as long as they're 6'3", that's all I need. That's all I need to hear. And
man, I'm so glad you didn't watch our first mock draft. I forgot who I had y'all take because I really didn't know about all the height issues that y'all had at wide receiver. So I overlooked that. I was like, they need wide receiver. Let me just give them Rondale Moore. Poor little 5'7" Rondale Moore on the outside to be a problem. And I'm thinking back now. I'm like, oh man, Makana with that whole keyboard would just be snapped in half at 160, just all upset. But man, as we get to this final question, I gotta ask: if let's say y'all get the edge rusher, you get Aziz in the first, you find a wide receiver late, like say Surratt or your boy from Stanford, what is your, expectations for the 2021 season?
Expectations for the season, I'm gonna say I expect the Ravens to win the North. I don't see Pittsburgh as a threat. I'm gonna regret this later, but I don't see Pittsburgh as a threat. I love the Ravens and how they match up against the Browns. I think they'll win the North. Expectations is it's AFC Championship game or bust this season. I think they have to prove they can get past the divisional round. I think they can absolutely do it if they bring in the right pieces, depending on upcoming free agency. With edge rusher and then also the draft. But I think they could really make the AFC Championship game and then make that final push. I would love to see them play Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game, have Lamar finally beat him. But AFC Championship game or bust would kind of be my expectation. I can, I'm going to regret this later. I can guarantee they're a playoff team. We need a lot of wood for me to knock on. I don't have any wood in my room. So, AFC Championship game or bust. That's my thought process going into the year.
I like the confidence. I'm sure Brandon is a Saints fan, wish he can guarantee playoff this year. Me as a Dolphins fan, I wish I could guarantee the playoffs, which probably isn't a guarantee either. So at least you could guarantee playoffs here. But man, we both appreciate you coming on here, talking some Ravens football with us. We're not NFL guys, so we figured we'd give it to the experts to let us know what these NFL teams are doing. But where can our listeners find you? I know I already told everyone we're having everyone from the Worst Take Network on here who covers an NFL team, so they know what to check out with the Worst Take Network. But where can they find you and your shows?
Yeah, so you can find my podcast. I do it with my co-host Joshua, Trust the Bank on all podcast platforms. But then I come out with Daily Ravens YouTube content on TTB Ravens Media on YouTube, and my Twitter for that account is at Trust the Bank, Truz with 2 Z's. So that's where you can find me. Let me know you're coming over from here because I'm excited to listen to the other teams that you guys are talking about, because obviously I don't listen to a lot of or I don't watch a ton of college football, but I do really enjoy it. So it's a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Absolutely, man. Yeah, we're kicking it off Monday. We're releasing one a day, man. They're just going to be coming out rapid fire on our YouTube channel. So we definitely appreciate you. So make sure to go check out all the Ravens content at TTB. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel there. Make sure to follow Makana and the Worst Take Network on Twitter. Y'all know where to find me and B-Dub. Y'all know where to find the Blue Bloods. If y'all watching this, y'all are here to support. As y'all know, once we hit 100 subscribers, we're doing a merch giveaway, so make sure to get us there. We're up over 70 now, so shout out to y'all for that. But for Makana, for myself, for B-Dub, and the Blue Bloods guys, we are out.